I gotta work. Not too bad. Alrighty. How's it going, guys? What is up? Hey, Philosoport, how's it going? Oh, this is my interviews. Response vids. There we go. Now chat is working. Shh. Go to sorry, my cats. Reverend Dr. Thomas, how's it going? This guy up here. Guy over here, like that. Alright. Guy goes here like this. Yeah, that looks good. That looks decent enough. I can tolerate this. Fine. Fine. How's it going, guys? I can't even read the chat over there. It's too small. Chat box. Chat box. Chat box. There we go. Chat box. Unlock. Increase size. Down there. Chat chooses like random colors every time. Like other random colors every time. Pink. But we're going with pink today, apparently. Clinton Noreen, how's it going? Get a little bigger, I guess. All right, so today I was watching this Some More News video and wanted to do a response because they got some stuff wrong. Like I like Some More News. Some More News is good. They're good stuff, but they're not doing great on this video. They make some pretty simple mistakes. Volume up. Cogito. I don't care. My volume's maxed. It's already maxed. It does look really low. Why is it really low right now? That's weird. That's really weird. Filters, properties, filters, edit filters. Minus, plus, gain, done, gain, plus like I've done. Testing. Now it should be a little better. It's a little louder now, right? Yes, that's 5. All right. So I added a bit of volume, a little bit of gain there. Let me know how it is. I have no idea how the gain thing works on that, so let me know. So yeah, all right. Do you guys watch Some More News? Because I definitely do. Big fan. They're a great show for the most part. Gain down to 2, done. Testing. All right. I don't think, is that enough? That should be enough. Filters. Gain 3. Let's give it a 3. Done. Okay. That's good enough. I'm fine with that. All right. So I was watching these guys and they made some silly mistakes. And I was like, wait a minute. Normally these guys are so good. Why does it not make sense what they're saying now? It's completely gibberish. So let's take a look at what these guys have to say.
Would be the more centric.
They're critiquing conservative comedy, which I mean, I'm not like I lean left. So in case you don't know, I'm a centrist, but I'm a left-leaning centrist. But these jokes, I mean, they seem to make sense to me, but they don't seem to make sense to Some More News.
Take, which is that both liberals and conservatives are humorless when it comes to jabs at their own beliefs. There are multiple psychological studies claiming that conservatives don't have a sense of humor. And truth be told, I didn't look into those studies because I just don't think that that's true. Call it.
What's up, guys? I'm actually doing pretty good today. Like I've had a cold for like the past week, which sucks, but I'm doing a lot better right now. Much better right now.
faith, I guess, but I think everyone has a sense of humor, even ghosts and spiders. The more nuanced phrasing of this comes from the Washington Post, referring to Sigmund Freud's wit and its relation to the unconscious, which pointed out that a joke is only as good as a third party's willingness to accept a joke. And like, I don't know, that guy cigars or whatever, but what he's saying is that even the funniest joke falls flat with the wrong audience. But the truth is, that equation is backward. And what I mean is that it should be that even the funniest joke falls flat when it's told by someone who has bad intentions.
And they've canceled people that are more powerful than me. They canceled J.K. Rowling. My God, J.K. Rowling wrote all the Harry Potter books by herself. She sold so many books, the Bible worries about her.
Dave Chappelle is funny.
And they canceled her because she said in an interview, and this is not exactly what she said, but effectually, she said, gender was a fact. I'm Team Turf. I agree, man. Gender is a fact.
First of all, he's conflating gender with sex.
So this is one of the first mistakes that they make. Like, using the term gender to be synonymous with sex is a completely legitimate usage of the term. You can mean gender and sex are exactly the same thing. Sex is gender. There are only two sexes. Gender is sex. There are only two genders. That is a completely legitimate usage of the term. And it's one that many people in the world have been brought up to use. That's how they were taught to use the terms. And so using it in that way, as Dave is doing, makes perfect sense. Whether or not you agree doesn't matter. If that's how they use the terms, they are completely legitimate in using the terms in that way. So some more news guy is just wrong here. Like, no, you don't get to dictate how other people choose to use language. If that's how they were brought up using the term, then they get to use the term that way. It's just as simple as that. It's an error to say that because you have a different usage, that their usage is wrong. It's completely incorrect.
Gender is a social construct. We made it up, like money or around Earth. But even if he said sex is a fact, at
Around Earth. Love it.
around 5 weeks, a fetus forms a cluster of cells that can either turn into weird smooth testicles or weird smooth ovaries. And it's a gene called SRY that activates the former of the two. But that gene isn't a binary on and off function, but rather a sliding scale that can and will sometimes cause a person to be born with neither female or...
But none of that matters. So this is picking an outlier. I think there's actually a name of a fallacy for this that says if you pick a specific outlier that happens at a very rare case, a rare chance outlier, and say this is a exception to the rule, therefore the rule is false, which isn't the case. Like, using language, if it applies to the vast majority of people accurately, then to say that that rule is in fact wrong or flawed because there is a specific outlier is itself fallacious. So it's totally fine to use gender and sex as a binary, even though there are a 0.000 something percent outliers, because it doesn't make a difference to the overall rule. So it is, again, a completely legitimate usage of the term to refer to sex and gender as a binary. It's just taking left-wing notes here and just ignoring the fact that there is a legitimate alternative to the position.
or male genitalia. Doctors will often choose a gender to go with, but we later learned that this choice could result in the child growing up with a different gender identity than what was given to them at birth. Meanwhile, other genes like DMRT1 and FOXL2 will maintain gender characteristics later in life but can stop functioning. On top of this, the brain itself has no binary gender. There's no male brain or female brain. The point I'm making here is that no, gender is not a fact. It's actually quite slippery according to real science. And I'm not going to get into all the details, nor do I want to get into this too much, because Dave Chappelle, for starters, isn't a conservative. But he is an objectively successful and subjectively extremely hilarious comedian with very...
He's objectively hilarious. Dave Chappelle is objectively hilarious most of the time, not all the time. Like, his TV shows aren't as good, but his stand-up's pretty good.
Incorrect opinions on transgender people. He claims in this special that he has no problem with the trans community, and I'm sure he believes that, even though he won't shut the f*** up about them. I bring all this up because his Netflix special is currently the subject of both protests and counter-protests.
Well, he has shut the fuck up about them. Like, he's literally said he's not going to do any more jokes about them because it's too vitriolic a community, so it's not technically correct. The fact that he's made jokes about them doesn't mean it's the only thing he talks about. He talks about lots of different things. The fact that the left thinks he doesn't shut up about it is because those are the only jokes they actually like critique and highlight all the time. This is not like his only joke. He makes jokes about all kinds of stuff. So it's, again, an unfair criticism by some more news here saying he doesn't shut up about it. Like, no, this is not the only thing he talks about. He talks about lots of different things. This is a dumb comparison.
The counter-protesters' view very much being, you just can't take a joke. There's a narrative here that Dave...
That's the correct answer here. That the SJWs just can't take a joke. It's that simple.
Chappelle makes fun of everyone. So why is it that only trans people get offended? Are they just humorless? See, the problem is that framing this about humor actually deflects from the problem. And to put it into perspective, imagine...
That is the problem. The problem is that you can't make jokes about things without people overreacting like they're jokes. There's no problem here.
If a comedian was going around making jokes about how being gay is a choice. It wouldn't matter if the jokes they were making were funny because the premise they are selling would be fundamentally harmful and wrong. Chappelle claims he has no problem with trans people, but is saying things that are factually wrong and designed to discredit them. It's propaganda, no different than Gutfeld.
No, he's not in any way trying to discredit them. Like, Dave did a great little talk about how he has friends, a really close friend who was trans. He's not discrediting trans people. He's just stating his position and the position of many people that gender and sex are the same thing. They're synonymous terms. The fact that you disagree doesn't mean he's discrediting them. That's the fundamental fallacy of the SJW movement, is that, oh, you disagree, therefore you're discrediting me. Like, no, that's not how it works. You can't just say that because someone disagrees or has a different position that they're harming you. Disagreement isn't harm. Words aren't harm. It's such a stupid SJW position.
Saying that Democrats want crime to happen. The only contrast being that Dave Chappelle is actually funny. So it's not that trans people can't take a joke. And in fact, there are tons of examples of trans comedians.
Thank you, Cosmic. Appreciate it.
In stuff like roast battles, clearly taking jokes. Is that these specific jokes are framed as hard truths that are actually based on weird lies used to justify marginalizing an already marginalized and vulnerable group of people.
Well, again, so this is some more news just being dishonest here. Like, there was no lie in anything Dave said there. He said there are two genders. That is a completely legitimate usage of the term. Using gender as sex, synonymous with sex, is a completely legitimate usage of language. The fact that you disagree doesn't make them factually wrong. It's just, no.
People. Lies that have been repeated as jokes over and over again by conservatives. To quote this Parker Malloy article, I'm not asking comedians to stop telling trans jokes. I'm asking them to stop telling the same trans jokes over and over. And here's...
Well, this is again, the left's problem here is that they strawman the Republican position. They don't actually understand it. Like, the reason they keep telling those jokes over and over again is because it's representative of what they actually believe. And so simply saying, stop saying what you believe, is just a stupid thing to say. Like, of course they're going to continue to make jokes that represent what they actually believe, because that's kind of how jokes work. They have to have some kind of semblance of truth there. So instead of saying, stop telling the jokes of, or stop saying things that you believe, why don't you like actually address what they believe or acknowledge that their position is completely legitimate? Like saying gender and sex are synonymous terms. That's a legitimate usage of language. Saying it's not, in saying that there's some correct usage of language out there, or an objective truth of language, is false. If they were making some claim about like reality, like psychological states don't exist, then maybe you would have some ground to stand on. If their claim was something like, no, you can never psychologically perceive yourself to be one sex or the other, to have similarities between one sex and the other, then yeah, that would be false. But no one is claiming that. On the right wing, all they're doing is they're just using the word gender to refer to sex. That's it. That's the only thing they're doing. They're saying those two terms are synonymous in their vernacular, which is legitimate. That's a completely legitimate criticism. And so when you make up this new vernacular to have gender be a psychological construct, when in their worldview it only refers to a biological, physical construct, then it seems to them that you're making stuff up. And that is a completely legitimate criticism of the SJW movement. And simply saying that they're wrong and that your interpretation of words is correct doesn't in any way provide any constructive criticism or give them any reason to stop making jokes that to express their position.
Here's a clip of exactly that.
A lot of people mad at Dave Chappelle right now. It's interesting. Look, and here's my thing. He's been doing comedy for a long time. I feel like you should be able to write a trans joke without offending people. I was high the other day. I wrote this one. Check this out. I'm honestly kind of jealous of trans men, right? Because they're completely men and the get to have cute feet. I don't think that's fair.
See, the appeal of someone like Chappelle is that he tells it like...
So that wasn't a funny joke. Like, cute feet? Like, how is this a funny joke? Like, Dave Chappelle's jokes are actually funny. Like, that wasn't funny. I don't get it.
That's a whole genre of comedy where the points being made can almost intersect with philosophical truth or political truths, and there are cathartic moments where the comic doesn't even really make a joke so much as say something profound. See Carlin, George.
True. George Carlin. Amazing.
Problem is that this is a very hard thing to do and will go very wrong if the person is, say, incredibly wrong about stuff.
Honest to God, environmentalists, quit ripping into me. I am serious when I ask you, how can the planet heating up make it colder? That's all I want to know. Quit telling me what a stupid son of a bitch I am and tell me that.
Hey, Dennis, so when the Arctic warms up...
Well, I mean, that's a legitimate criticism of the global warming movement, is that it is hard to understand. Like, one of the big problems in science is that it's really hard to express complicated scientific positions in a way that people understand them. And so this seeming contradiction between global warming causing things to get colder is something that the scientific community needs to address more clearly, and bringing that out in the form of a criticism like the comedians and Republicans do, I think is valuable in its own way. I mean, totally, global warming is definitely real. 100% global warming is a real thing, but you need to be able to explain that in a way that is easy to understand.
up, that disturbs a circular wind pattern called the polar vortex that moves cold air. Wait, actually, I bet a million people...
Unlike that. So explaining it like that is a terrible way. You need to explain it in an easy way, a simple way that people can understand and grasp onto. Explaining them a whole bunch of science is never going to do anything. So again, the problem here is that seeming contradiction between the global warming causing things to get cooler because the title is global warming, is hard for people to understand. It seems like a contradiction, so people who don't believe it are always going to reject that because the title and the outcome seem obviously different. But that is a valid criticism that the left should learn from in order to reevaluate their position to be able to express it in a clearer way. But yeah, just trying to explain to them really complicated science isn't going to solve this problem. You got to make an easier way to do it.
Already told you this, you stupid son of a bitch. Dennis doesn't make a joke there because he thinks this rotund truth dump about climate change is huge enough to work on its own. But in reality, he's just being obtuse and using wordplay in order to seem like he's calling out an inconsistency. Why do they call them hot dogs if they're not made out of dogs? Pause for laughter and awards. I almost can't talk about this stale dip in the context of politics, even though he is firmly conservative now. And that's because he was and always will be terrible, regardless of his political affiliation. Dennis Miller's whole bit was that he was some funny intellectual looking down at us dum-dums. But as the years progressed, it became clear that he just owned a thesaurus. He once made a tweet so confusing that
I don't know anything about this guy. I don't watch him, so I have no idea. I have no idea what this guy's talking about.
people worried he was suffering a stroke. Here's another one saying, and I'm going to do this one out loud. Progressives are shooting themselves in the foot more frequently than a centipede who, quite frankly, is getting no relief whatsoever from a topical application of a generic antifungal toenail cream. So ironically, he actually is an amazing asset to comedy, just not in the way he thinks he is. Remember when he starred in a Tales from the Crypt movie? That's not relevant to anything we're talking about, but I just wanted to say it out loud. There was a brief window of time where Hollywood looked at him and saw a leading man. That window being exactly 1996 and not a year before or after. Anyway, I gotta go dump out. So I guess I'll put on some ads and then we'll be right back talking about other people talking about funny stuff. I promise this all do not go in there. Smoking. Okay, and we're back. In case, for some reason, you forgot, we're talking about conservative humor and why it doesn't work. Specifically, the excuse that liberals simply don't find their humor funny because we're triggered or offended or whatever.
Pretty much. Like, that's a completely legitimate thing. Like, yeah, a lot of the conservative comedy is funny because it represents things that happen. And then the left is just, no, that doesn't happen. It's a lie. Totally a lie.
And while I can't speak for everyone, the actual truth there is that much like Dennis Miller's zinger about toenail cream not helping a centipede get relief so it shoots itself in the feet, like progressives, the conservative jokes about liberals and Dems aren't really offensive, but rather so confusing or inconsistent that they just don't actually touch a nerve. For example,
I'm Wes Halula.
I'm Ethan Nicole. This is the Babylon Bee News Desk.
As President Biden's drone strikes continue to rain down terror on unsuspecting Middle Easterners, many have begun to paint the colors of the transgender flag over their doorposts in hopes that the drone strikes pass them by.
It was discovered that President Biden programmed the drones to ignore homes showing support for transgenderism, and as a result, dozens of lives have been spared. A baker's dozen at most.
oh sweet, the Babylon Bee. You thought I didn't see you over there, but I did. See, the joke that they continue in the bit is that Biden is so militaristically pro-trans and therefore bombing anyone who isn't. The problem is that while Biden has reversed a lot of Trump's shitty policies surrounding the LGBTQ community, he actually hasn't done too much else besides that. And so if you were to make fun of Biden, perhaps you could mock him for presenting as an ally while not putting his money where his mouth is. That's the reality. The actual criticism that would likely bother Biden supporters. Or,
So this is a completely legitimate point. Like, yeah, like the Democratic political class is seen as like pro-LGBT, pro-allies, but they're totally not. They're doing it for show in order to get votes. And so it's completely made up, but it works. I mean, it works to polarize the right and the left and make it seem like they're allies to get allied support, especially because the Republicans are actually promoting it and saying, oh, look, they're so pro-ally, and they do all this pro-ally stuff, which then gets them more support by the LGBT community because they present themselves as pro-ally. And then the Republicans criticize them for being pro-ally, even though most of the Democrats don't do anything related to pro-allies, LGBT community. They don't really, they make non-effective kinds of policies that seem like they're there to do anything, but really don't do much.
Slapping on a BLM sticker to a drone that's killing brown people overseas. But by framing it as this pretend world where Biden is a pro-trans fascist only appeals to the far-right fantasy version of politics. And that's fine. Their audience is conservatives and not liberals, after all. But what I'm honing in on here is whether these jokes would somehow offend liberals so that they don't find it funny. But it's just not funny? I don't know how else to describe it. It's not a very funny observation. In part because it's one they tell so many times. Hey, did you know the army is woke now? That's it. That's what the joke is. Not that the army is woke while perpetuating, war stuff, but rather that the army is now the bad thing. Wokeness. I guess the framing is technically different, but the punchline is always the same. On top of that, and this is pretty key.
Well, I mean, that kind of ignores the point. The point of the jokes there is that wokeness has some kind of detrimental effect, and that detrimental effect being imparted on the military makes it weaker or something like that. So the criticism, the joke, is more that the thing which is supposed to be supremely strong is adopting this really, really weak policy, and it's ironic. Not the literal sense of ironic, but that's the joke. It's really more about the weaknesses of wokeness and how it's directly contradictory to the aims of the military and how it has hugely negative outcomes. It's really more that is the joke. So it's just saying, oh, military is going weak, essentially.
I just don't believe they actually care about drone strikes. What I mean is that when you look at a site like The Onion and search the word drone, you'll see satire pointing out the ghoulishness of drones under every president. Whereas the Babylon Bee only started caring about drone strikes conveniently right as Biden took office. You can search their site and see that the only time they mention Trump and military drones is back when he was running for office.
That's actually true. Like, many Republican outlets of information are only critical of Democrats doing something, even though Republicans do it too, which is true of many Democratic outlets too, but more the liberal Democratic news places will normally criticize both Democratic presidents or Democratic political leaders and Republican political leaders, whereas Republican outlets usually tend to only criticize Democratic leaders. And the reason that is because the Republicans are losing ground and significance, like many things. As a political party or anything starts to lose power, only the more viral of the ideology continues to maintain, kind of like a virus. Like, if you have a vaccine for a virus and it kills off all of the weaker versions, the stronger versions of the virus live. And so as the Republican Party loses significance in the cultural mindset, they're going to become more radicalized. And so you're going to see more of this kind of Republicans only criticizing Democrats and not really caring about whether their party does the immoral thing. It's a pretty common theme among politics. And as people lose influence, or as an ideology or a virus loses influence, the more the more virulent strains proliferate and survive, where the more moderate strains don't. It's an unfortunate fact of human nature that people like the extremes more than anything, which is why the polarization of politics is a thing.
Then they dropped the subject completely during his loser term. In other words, the Bee sure seems disingenuously concerned about drones in order to roast Biden, and perhaps, interestingly, specifically trans people, whereas The Onion is taking a hard moral stance despite who is president. And so going back to why the Bee is less funny, it's at least in part because we all sort of know they're pulling their punches for the GOP while grotesquely demonizing the left.
K9 Strike. I'm a far leftist, but I think Some More News is quite cringe. Like, I'm a big fan of Some More News. I think most of their stuff is really funny and really good. They do a lot of really good stuff, but the example of like this is where they make so many mistakes. Like, they're just straw manning the position and ignoring what the actual criticism is. And there are legitimate criticisms in the points of Republican comedy. And so just ignoring the legitimate criticisms presented, like Dave Chappelle's earlier on, like, it is completely legitimate to use gender as synonymous with sex. That is a legitimate vernacular of language. I don't know what the correct language term there is, but their usage of that term is completely legitimate, and denying that and simply just saying they're wrong is false. Like, no, you don't just get to say that the way they have been brought up using the word for their entire life is wrong because you have a different way of using the word. It doesn't work that way. Or saying that they're racist or sexist or transphobic because they've been brought up using this word this entire way, this way their entire life, and you use it differently. It's not how language works.
They have a transparent agenda and are clearly
Thank you, Jacob. Appreciate the super chat.
angry at Democrats, often to the point that they forget to put satire first. For example, they have scores of articles mocking AOC for being childishly dumb. But that doesn't make any sense. What controversy there is around AOC has nothing to do with her intelligence. Voting president was a bit of a cowardly political move, as AOC herself has pointed out about others and herself. Maybe there's like a joke there, instead of her not knowing basic words. They're just calling her dumb because they don't like her, I guess, which is not very funny or offensive.
Well, I mean, this happens on both sides. Like, I don't know why this is like he's bringing this up as a criticism, saying Republicans aren't funny because they do this. Like, remember Trump? Like, what is it? Man, woman, chair, TV, something. Human, woman, chair, man, TV. I forget what the statement is. People make fun of all of the politicians who do this stupid stuff where they say and make verbal mistakes. This is not a Republican thing here. This is literally everyone. Everyone does this. Like you can find it on YouTube for every video. It's not, this is like basic stuff. This has nothing to do with the Republican or conservative comedy. This is irrelevant to the topic. This is just what everyone does in terms of comedy for every position.
Offensive or edgy because there's no actual nerve it's hitting. But according to the editor-in-chief of the Bee, what I just said is actually the joke. In an interview with The Atlantic, he describes their AOC as stupid articles as an Andy Kaufman-esque self-parody making fun of themselves. He calls it one of their best...
So Reloaded Dice said, I was brought up saying African-American, therefore when someone is offended, if I call them that, it's their problem. Like, yes, that's actually true. Like, many people were brought up saying African-American or black. Like, it shouldn't be offensive to someone being called an African-American. This is not a derogatory term in any way. It's not like you were a slaver and enslaver to them and calling them African-American. No, this is just a generic term. This should not be offended by being called an African-American. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Jokes, because so many on leftist Twitter complained that the joke isn't funny. Not because it's offensive, but just because it's not funny. And that's the joke? A joke that he has to explain because literally no one got it. So first of all, I guess congratulations that you think your best joke is making fun of how your jokes are bad. But also, there's no real way to tell that it's a parody because, and this is pretty key, it's not any different from other Babylon Bee articles. When they wanted to tackle the subject of, say, Kamala Harris and immigration, they frame it as Kamala Harris hoping her unlikability will distract from her terrible job fixing the border. The joke being that she sucks and is not fixing the border. Was this also an Andy Kaufman self-parody? Just how many of their articles are avant-garde Banksy subversions of themselves?
No, it seems like a Trump thing. Like, it seems like a parody of Trump. Like, where Trump was distracted from his terrible job of fixing everything by his unlikable personality. So it seems like they're parodying the Republican or the Democratic criticisms of Trump, or what Trump actually did, because those were legitimate criticisms, as a Democratic thing too.
Meanwhile, The Onion tackled the same idea with Kamala Harris deeply troubled by images of Haitian migrants.
Euthyphro dilemma. What makes a derogatory term a derogatory term? It's the intention of the person using it. If the person uses the term with the intention of being derogatory, that's what makes it a derogatory term. There's no term which in and of itself is derogatory except like a sentence which the forming of the sentence is literally derogatory. Like, you are fat and ugly. Like, that would be a derogatory term because the structure of the words is derogatory. But what makes any particular word derogatory is the intention. It's absolutely the intention. So excuse me, but no intention is irrelevant. He's wrong. So you're wrong. Excuse me. It's literally the intention that makes the term derogatory. It literally can't be anything else. And we can prove this. We can prove it's necessarily intention because if you think of a society where someone was brought up using the term like in a completely innocuous way, like, let's say the word blue or whatever. The word blue is just a color. And then there's a completely different society where they say, no, the word blue refers to like a certain group of people who are terrible slave people or whatever. Is the person in the society where it was brought up saying blue is just a color? Are they racist now? Would you be racist if there was another planet of... So think about it this way. Think about it this way. Like, if there's a planet out there, like on Mars or whatever, and there's blue aliens and there's another group of green aliens, and the green aliens are super derogatory towards the blue aliens. Oh, you're so blue, you blues, silly blues. And then the blues come to Earth. And are we racist because we use the term blue? No, obviously not. Because we have no derogatory usage of the word blue. It's just a color. So the fact that some other race in some other location treated the blue race as derogatory doesn't mean the word blue is inherently derogatory. It is necessarily tied to intention. It has to be. The word itself, it can never itself be derogatory unless it's like defined as being derogatory or something like, I don't know, asshole. Like asshole, I think might be like, not even, asshole is technically not derogatory because it can be a technical term too. So I don't know if there's a word that can be inherently derogatory.
At border, whom she distinctly remembers telling not to come here. And like...
What does avant-garde mean? Avant-garde. What does avant-garde mean? A Russian hypersonic glide vehicle? Did you mean avant-garde? Vanguard? Literally foreguard? I don't know. Foreguard? Yeah.
Do you see the difference? One is just, she sucks, and more importantly, we don't like her. And the other actually points out that she's a hypocrite. I definitely don't want to sit here and just read headlines like I'm Jay Leno or something, so I'll stop there. My point being that there are two angles here. One coming from blunt force dislike, while the other is a way more nuanced criticism. And then apparently, they will sometimes parody their own blunt force dislike without
Thanks for the super chat, Genius. Dislike when they mismeasure my schwanch using inches. It's yards. Ha! That's funny.
telling us, I guess. And so the intent behind a lot of Babylon Bee jokes are already extremely confusing. And it's hard to find something funny if you fundamentally don't understand the intent of it because it's being hidden.
Yeah, Genius Tracks. Decreasing everyone's sensitivity would actually be a strong step in fighting bullying. That's technically correct. Yeah, I think that the problem, like, I'm for free speech. Like, I'm like an extreme free speechist. I think all words should be, you can say whatever you want. The problem isn't the words. The problem is people are stupid enough to listen to the words and be affected by them. So, like, slander. If you said, oh, you stole my wallet, and they didn't steal your wallet, the problem is all of the stupid people who actually listen and believe what you said and then treat that person differently because they believe what you said. If everyone was just a skeptic and didn't listen and believe, because listening and believing is stupid and you shouldn't do it, like evidence or it didn't happen, then the world would be a significantly better place. So just listening and believing is a huge problem. And if people were just more tolerant and stopped being wusses and accepted things based off of any words, that would solve a lot of the bullying issue. Stop being affected by what people say, because they're words. Sticks and stones. Learn the sticks and stones thing. It's good.
Hidden from you. This also suspiciously protects the bee from having to admit they aren't funny, because they can hide behind this agent of chaos excuse where they're so funny that they aren't funny or something like that. But going all the way back to what that cigar fucker said about the audience being a key factor, any and all meta jokes are routinely lost on their core audience of conservatives. I'm going to show you one of their sketches, and I want you to try to figure out what the joke is.
Hey there, you might have heard discussion about CRT, and you might be worried that we teachers are brainwashing your kids with critical race theory. Well, you should be worried. We are absolutely indoctrinating them with this stuff. If you want to know for sure that your kids are being taught CRT in school, look for these 5 signs. Number 1, they call your boss to tell them how racist you are, and they get you fired. Look, if your kid tries to get you canceled because you perpetuate systems of oppressive whiteness by treating all races equally, which is totally racist, they might be learning CRT at school.
So the premise is,
well, so that was easy. So that's a legitimate thing that actually happens. That is a literal thing that happens all the time because of cancel culture. Like, this happened to Thunderfoot. Thunderfoot, a bunch of SJWs called his place of work and mailed his place of work because he made anti-feminist videos and tried to get him fired. This is a legitimate thing that happens all the time because of SJW culture, and it's completely asinine. It's completely insane that a bunch of crazy SJWs will call up someone's work and said, oh, this person said something anti-feminist, therefore you should fire them. That's the joke here. The joke is that this is a real thing that happens all the time because of this SJW cancel culture, where cancellations are a form of power that you can use over people who disagree with you. It's completely asinine. This joke makes perfect sense. Like, the fact that you don't get this, some more news guy, is kind of dumb. Like, this is pretty obvious. It's obvious what this joke is, and it's a prescient point in today's society.
Is that these are a series of signs that critical race theory is being taught in your schools. And the joke is that all the signs are over-the-top reactions against appropriation and shame for being white and such. It's an exaggeration, or an irony, used to ridicule a belief, also known as satire. But what's fascinating is that this premise seems to be satirizing the right, isn't it? Because the exaggeration is that CRT would turn kids into these over-the-top left-wing stereotypes when
because it has. Like, so that's a thing we see. We see that occurring all the time, that SJWs are a result of this mentality. See, the critical race theory kind of mentality. It's obviously not critical race theory because it hasn't been instantiated yet. It's just like the outlashing of feminism in general. And so CRT is essentially synonymous with feminism. Therefore, it makes perfect sense why they would say that, oh, look, this feminist ideology leads to this feminist consequence of all these crazy people trying to get you fired.
Obviously, it wouldn't, right? Otherwise, it's just saying what they really think CRT can do to kids, in which case, then what's the joke? So doesn't that mean the B is making fun of the right-wing outrage at CRT?
The truest, there is definitely such a thing as cancel culture. It is the tendency to try and get people canceled or fired. It's like, it's happened a bunch on YouTube. Like, I think even Keemstar made it, like, he's recently saying he's quitting video because no one's willing to do drama because they're all politicized on YouTube. No one's willing to actually do drama because they're going to lose their sponsorships or get canceled. Yes, cancel culture is a real thing. It's obvious. Like this, it's been a thing forever, except it usually started with like killing people who disagreed with you. Cancel culture has always been a thing. And if you don't know that, you're kind of dumb. Like obviously cancel culture is a thing. It's always been a thing.
I mean, maybe, right? Is this like the AOC joke? It's possible they would do that, I guess, apparently. And yet, weirdly, this video is filled with comments by anti-CRT people saying shit like, the line between satire and reality is being blurred, as if the stuff in this video is like real things people are saying. And this is where...
Free speech. No, free speech is having the right to say something and not get punished for it. Having the right to say something and having someone else call your boss and try and get you fired is anti-free speech. That's a punishment for free speech. Free speech is being able to say whatever you want without any kind of consequences. That's free speech. Like what you're saying, the truest is as stupid as saying, oh, well, someone in the 16th century could say, oh, well, God's a dumbass and he murdered babies, so we should not worship God, and then be burned at the stake. But that's totally free speech because they could say it. Oh, who cares if they get burned at the stake? Well, they still had free speech. Like that's so idiotic. Free speech is the right to say things without consequence. That's free speech.
My brain starts hurting because the video itself really seems to be mocking the over-exaggeration of CRT fears, but the audience seems to miss that and see it as a commentary of the very real dangers of teaching CRT. The Bees audience are definitely more right-wing than left-wing, and every other thing they did on critical race theory clearly reflects a right-wing view on it. I don't know, maybe this was written by their one writer who is pro-CRT or anti-CRT, or is it the Andy Kaufman thing again? But there's an easier answer here. Going back to the fact that conservative humor is often met with a level of confusion from liberals about what exactly the joke is, and perhaps right now, a Babylon Bee writer or some conservative is watching my confusion and laughing at it.
Is calling a boss free speech too? Technically, yes. The problem is that the fact that your free speech can get people fired because of cancel culture is the problem. So free speech would be protections against your speech getting you fired. So that would be the true free speech. The free speech is like legal protections where someone can't fire you because of what you say outside of the job. That would be free speech. So free speech is protection of speech that is not what people want to say. I think Hitchens expressed this best. Hitchens on free speech. Hitchens on free speech. Christopher Hitchens on speech. 20 minutes. I want to do 20 minutes. Hitchens on free speech. X videos.
Fire, 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 fire. Now you've heard it.
21 minutes, 20 minutes. Give me a shorter one.
Bear in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that every time you violate or propose to violate the free speech of someone else, you, in potentia, you're making a rod for your own back, because the other question raised by Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes is simply this: who's going to decide? To whom do you award the right to decide?
No, the truest. You're an idiot. So I don't want people to not respond to it. They can respond to it all they want. I want the freedom of consequences. So no one's allowed to fire you because of what you said when you're not on the job. No one's allowed to ban you on social media because of what you said on some other social media platform. That would be freedom of speech. You can respond. That's totally fine. You can make response videos. That's perfectly legitimate. Getting them fired or getting their rights taken away, that's not. That is dumb. That is wrong and evil. You should never take someone's rights away because they have a different opinion than you.
Decide which speech is harmful, or who is the harmful speaker, or to determine in a...
Benevolent intelligence. I'd say that freedom of speech should be expanded to social media. You can't get banned. Like if someone records you in a bar or something, no social media platform can ban you because of that. Like that would be wrong. Like if you said it on the social media platform, then fine. The social media platform can ban you, but they can't ban you for what happens outside of their platform. That's totally wrong.
Advance, what are the harmful consequences going to be that we know enough about in advance to prevent? To whom would you give this job? To whom are you going to award the task of being the censor? Isn't it a famous old story that the man who has to read all the pornography...
Mike Schwapp, can your employer fire you for speech used at work? Yes. So if you're at work and they're paying you to do something at their location, then yeah, you're subject to what their rules are regarding the speech. But if you're at home in your own private residence and you say something, then no, your employer can't fire you for what you said in your own residence or in private or in public outside of the job. No, that would be wrong.
In order to decide what's fit to be passed and what is fit not to be, is the man most likely to become debauched. Did you hear any speaker in the opposition to this motion, eloquent as one of them was, to whom you would delegate the task of deciding for you what you could read? To whom you would give the job of deciding for you, relieve you of the responsibility of hearing what you might have to hear? Do you know anyone? Hands up. Do you know anyone to whom you'd give this job? Does any...
Benevolent intelligence, I don't care about what the laws are today. Like, there's lots of immoral laws today. I'm advocating for a better society that's not crap. So the correct way to do free speech is to give everyone protection so that they can say what they want to say in private, in public spaces, without being punished by anybody. They should be able to say what they want. Unless it's, of course, if it's like actually illegal, like death threats or whatever, that would be something that the law can punish you for. But like private companies should not be able to fire you or to ban your accounts or whatever because of what you say in public. Your freedom of speech should be protected in public and in private, your home.
Anyone have a nominee? You mean there's no one in Canada good enough to decide what I can read or hear? I had no idea. But there's a law that says there must be such a person, or there's a subsection of some piddling law that says it. Well, the hell with that law then. It's inviting you to be liars and hypocrites and to deny what you evidently know already. Where are your priorities, ladies and gentlemen? You're giving away what's most precious in your own society, and you're giving it away without a fight, and you're even praising the people who want to deny you the right to resist it. Shame on you while you do this.
Excuse me, now you're drawing lines? Yeah, you can draw lines. Like, again, this is what I mentioned earlier. The cherry picking fallacy doesn't apply here. Like, I don't need to say literally all words can be said to say there is free speech. The point is that you should be able to say things in most contexts. This doesn't mean all contexts. But we can definitely draw lines, like threatening to kill people. That's definitely a line. Saying that you don't like feminism is not on that line, obviously not on that line. So there's no comparison there. It's a false analogy to try and compare those two. So obviously the SJWs are dumbasses here. They're just like, nope, you don't. No, there's no negotiation. This is really simple. Like, no, the lines are obvious. Lines are super obvious. It's morally obvious, just like how most severe crimes are obvious, like violent crime is obvious. There's no ambiguity here. Comparing feminism to murder is no comparison.
Because what Andy Kaufman was, his specific brand, would now be called trolling. Kaufman would do things like wrestle women to show how weak they are. The punchline being that he was doing an act to get a reaction from audiences. The joke was that people were offended. That's the core idea behind trolling, which is really just another word for like a prank. You want the reaction. A notable successful troll would be people like Ken M or Daniel from SL, who prey on small circles on the internet acting oblivious and frustrating so that we, the actual audience, can laugh at the exchanges, right? A more mainstream version is the fellows or chaps at Jackass, honking air horns at cracker-ass golfers trying to make their putts or swings or whatever golfers do. I didn't look into it. Something about flags. But in all those cases, the trolls have two things in common. The people they're pranking are a small niche group, and they inherently have a good sense of comedy in what they do. Daniel from SL's most notable work is when he played the game Rust, pretended not to know how to use a bow and arrow for way too long, while other players tried to teach him, and then uses the bow and arrow perfectly to kill the people trying to help him. There's a setup and punchline there beyond the frustration of the gamers in the video. It might feel weird that I'm sitting here explaining comedy bits like a parent describing a 30 Rock episode, but honestly, you're gonna wish I kept going instead of showing you this clip.
Darn tranny. It's always giving me problems with That's the last time I drive a Chevy. I'll tell you that. Anyway, this week I changed my gender and went to Planet Fitness. Just one thing, careful to your back. It can hurt your back. It's a little rounded. Just make sure it's flat. Excuse me. I just need just some help to get the weight up, and in case just in case for safety, but I should be good.
Okay, super not gonna spend a lot of time on Crowder because, But here we have a video where Steven Crowder pretends to be a trans woman, goes to the gym, and then just annoys people in a way that has nothing to do with being trans.
Okay, I was good. Thank you. I just need help lifting up. What was that? Oh, trying to run away. I said it was trying to run away from me.
Biting commentary.
I have no idea what you're saying, benevolent intelligence. Like, my standard is pretty obvious and very easy to outlay here. Like, yes, there are some very rare instances where you can't use freedom of speech, like threatening to murder people. Like, this is just a stupid thing SJWs do, is that they complain about, oh, you're making limitations like you can't say kill. Can't threaten to kill people. Therefore, we can make stupid limitations like you can't criticize feminism. Like, nope. There's an obvious difference between those two. Like, there's absolutely no ambiguity here. It's really, really easy to understand the difference between what should be considered free speech, like just expressing your opinions, and what shouldn't, like death threats. There's no ambiguity here. It's just a bunch of silly SJWs complain, like, oh, you're making limitations in speech too, therefore we can. False equivalence fallacy. So obviously fallacious.
About trans people going to the gym who then cause a scene and break safety rules before being called out for being a right-wing shill.
But why are you telling me that I'm insincere? Because I know who you are. How do you know who I am? Are you saying that because that's pre-transition ID? Is that why?
So, what's really the punchline or observation here? I will answer that, actually. The punchline is all the people who would then share this on Twitter and say, what the f*** is this? The punchline is me, right now.
Wait, what? Excuse me, comedy is a great excuse for homophobes to dress up in women's clothes? Like, they can do that anyway. Like, doesn't actually change anything.
Asking what the punchline is. It's that I am reacting to it. Conservative comedians have become obsessed with getting a reaction from the left to the point that they've completely forgotten to say an actual joke. They do something pointless, often cruel or weird or factually wrong, and laugh when people point out that it's pointless.
K9, can feminism be good? Yeah, there's lots of good examples of feminism, like women's rights, gay rights, like the rights and freedoms of each individual being given is right. Totally good in lots of ways. As expressed in my morality, like every human being should have equal rights in the fact that any involuntary imposition of will is immoral. But that doesn't mean that you should restrict the rights of other people and their freedom of speech. That's the problem. So there's the modern example of feminism. The SJW movement is mostly wrong, even though their goals of inclusivity and diversity are fine. Their way about it is completely wrong.
Or cruel or weird or factually wrong. And so this idea that wit is based on a third party's willingness to accept a joke has actually become more meta than that. It's a comedian saying unfunny things to an audience, and then a second audience watching that first audience not laugh and finding that funny. Or in other words...
Can I get a comment at Media Matters?
The joke there is, look at this mean or incorrect thing I just said. Boy, that's gonna make people mad. And the insatiable lust for this end result, to have the media outraged over you, has really thrown off a lot of conservatives' ability to tell an actual joke. Because again, if the end result is to make liberals react or go, that's not funny, the easiest way to do that is to not be funny. And so it creates a built-in excuse for any time someone points that out. The Babylon Bee can comfortably lean back on the idea that they're comedy geniuses playing 4D chess because no one understood their super good joke about how doctors prescribe water to horses. Even if the political point they're trying to make is clear, the language and context and attempt is just, whoo boy, not great. Often.
So that's a legitimate criticism. Go back to the horse. That one. So this one, Joe Rogan was criticized for taking horse tranquilizer when the drug, I forget what it's called, isn't actually a horse. I mean, it's used in horse tranquilizer, but it's also used for lots of human related things. And so it was a factually wrong thing to compare the fact that that drug was used in a horse tranquilizer and then to say that ivermectin, thank you, excuse me. So yeah, ivermectin, which is used in horse tranquilizer, is also used in many human related drugs. So to say that because Joe Rogan and other people were taking ivermectin, they were taking horse tranquilizer is exactly like what this joke is. The point of this joke is like, Democrats refuse to drink water as it's also prescribed to horses. If there is some drug which is used in both human and animal related treatments, it's a hasty generalization fallacy to say you're taking horse tranquilizer because it can also be used in many different contexts, as was pointed out by Joe Rogan. Horse dewormer, thank you, not a tranquilizer. If they were actually using horse dewormer, then yeah, that's definitely a problem. But ivermectin isn't a horse dewormer. So there are many uses of ivermectin for human-related drugs as well. So they were not actually, most of them were not actually taking horse dewormer.
If the political...
Like Joe Rogan was not actually taking horse dewormer. He was taking an actual human drug. So again, excuse me, you're wrong on this. The fact that some people may have been doing that doesn't mean that Joe Rogan or that many people who were taking ivermectin were, which was the problem.
Point they're trying to make is clear. The language and context and attempt is just, whoo boy, not great. Often it all collapses in on itself, where the left will laugh at how ridiculous an attempt it is, and that reaction will be seen as a success. Ben Garrison comes to mind, because I bet the first time you saw a Ben Garrison political cartoon, you assumed that it was actually a satire of right-wing politics, until learning that it was actually genuine. And while I'm guessing here, the reason he probably draws Trump as this swole fuckable is that he knows that gets a reaction from the left. Also, there's at least a percentage of people masturbating to it, right? Like, am I right? I don't want to derail this, but I'm sure someone is masturbating to Ben Garrison's muscular, sweaty, pumping, veiny Trump drawings, really picturing his mounting presence like a tacky...
Excuse me, it doesn't matter if ivermectin is approved or not. That's irrelevant. The criticism is saying that you If you use ivermectin, then you are taking horse dewormer. That statement is false because ivermectin is more than just a horse dewormer. It's also in many human-related drugs. So it doesn't matter if it's experimental. It's relevant to the point. It's just again a left-wing deflection of the actual issue.
Steed, penetration, etc. Only the main reaction, besides the furious masturbation, is the left.
Excuse me, it's literally irrelevant to my argument because my argument is saying that because someone takes ivermectin, they are using horse dewormer is a false statement. It is a hasty generalization fallacy that only a dumbass would say because ivermectin is used in many human-related things as well. And so if you're taking one of the human-related ones, then you're not taking horse dewormer, which was what happened to Joe Rogan. He was taking a non-horse dewormer, which included ivermectin, and accused of taking horse dewormer, which is a hasty generalization fallacy. The left is wrong on this one. It is objectively wrong. And so your statement is irrelevant to the point. It's irrelevant to whether or not it's approved. You can make fun of saying you're taking drugs which aren't approved. That's fine. You can't say they're taking horse dewormer.
Laughing at him doing that. It's like urinating in your own mouth on the bus and then claiming you successfully triggered the passengers when they all leave at the next stop. And so triggering, or satire, or trolling often feels like a stand-in excuse for when they fail at a joke and need to fall back on something to save their piss-covered face.
Excuse me, it doesn't, again, it's still irrelevant to the argument. Like, whether or not rich people could get an experimental drug is irrelevant to the argument. Doesn't make a difference. So unless you have actual proof or statistics, you're just making shit up to deflect from the issue. And so again, irrelevant to the argument.
O and an F. Oofers. That's a cartoon released by the Daily Wire, claiming at the end there that until the white folk came around to America, Native Americans only had dream catchers, tomahawks, and cannibalism. And then we showed up and gave them all the other stuff, like medicine, breath mints, and plumbing, which are actually all things they already had a version of, but whatever. Oh, and one of the things they list is American football, which hilariously was invented by the Iroquois. Anywho, also a whole section about the cultivation of corn, of all things. But anywho, again, the point is that the video is clearly mocking Indigenous Peoples Day and trying, wrongly, to credit Europeans with advancing America. It's just what the video is about, and yet when the media correctly pointed out how racist and uneducated the video was, our pal Ben Shapiro claimed that it was just satire while also pulling the video from the site. But what does that mean? Once again, satire is the act of using exaggerations or irony to make a point, and this video isn't an exaggeration of leftist ideas. It's a straightforward video claiming that Europeans were the ones who actually invented civilization and made corn or some shit. So what's the satire of it then? The only answer is that it would be a satire of conservative views of Thanksgiving and Columbus Day, but on a conservative website. A conservative website its writers and editors all talk seriously about the glory of white Europeans civilizing the savages. So like, they know their opinions are dog shit? You see how this gets so confusing and muddled. And the obvious answer is that they totally earnestly meant to make that video racist and had to backtrack. Side note, Ben said he didn't know it went up and was on vacation at the time, despite the amount of time that goes into a cartoon and scheduling that goes into publishing a Columbus Day video on Columbus Day. Also, in his attempted explanation about the satire being a response to the left turning Columbus Day solely into a story about Western civilization genociding Native Americans, he put genociding in quotes. So maybe there's something there about the beliefs going on there? Anyway, it's like whenever people would say Trump was being sarcastic or trolling when he said completely serious and ghoulish things, but the things they would say he's trolling about often aligned with all of his other beliefs. So like, what, was his entire presidency ironic? Was he the Andy Kaufman of elected officials? Or once again, is this idea of satire or trolling a really convenient way to deflect literally any and all criticism? I feel like it's that second thing and not the Andy Kaufman thing. So there you have it. I successfully explained not much yet, actually. Suck a ball. We still haven't figured out why conservatives aren't funny, have we? And we're
Nope, we have not.
gonna break for ads? What are we, some kind of show? Hey there, news Dans and people not named Dan. If you run a small business, there is absolutely a subset of people who find cruelty in general very funny. Not in small doses or paired with humor, but just the act of being cruel. There are loads of prank videos on the internet that are just people assaulting other people without a joke in sight. And so going back to jokes or just...
Yeah, that is a thing. Like, yeah, people find harm very entertaining. It's a common feature of humanity. Cruelty is a thing. Like, I remember... Ricky Gervais was posting stuff about animal cruelty, and there was like entire Reddit communities, or I don't know, I think it was probably not Reddit, probably wasn't Reddit, it was probably something else, where there was like animal cruelty is like a really popular thing, and that is disgusting in a lot of ways. So yeah, people find cruelty entertaining, many do.
weird pranks around trans people, there is an oddly large audience who think that's actually punching up against a woke mob or something like that, who, much like we say about those golfers, say, f them.
They say I was punching down on them. Punching down.
This clip from Dave Chappelle is a really good clip. I don't know where it is, but it was a really good explanation of his position, and they should have just played the whole thing.
The fuck does that mean?
What the f do you think it means, millionaire comedian Dave Chappelle? The people who think the LGBTQ community has it, like, good now, because they got some rights and more representation, don't really seem to grasp how the last few years compare to all of human history before this moment. Like, this isn't the point of this video, but how fucking wild is that? That's like being saved from drowning, and then everyone immediately getting mad at how much air you're taking up. Let the fucking trans community have a goddamn motherfucking second to enjoy being slightly more represented in this country, and as this lady pointed out on Twitter, a chance to not be perpetually on the ropes about who they are. Like, maybe trans comedians could have more visibility if they didn't have to spend most of their time responding to this bullshit. You know? Sweet boiling Christ. Even the beacon of edgy humor, Norman 9/11 McDonald, stopped doing transgender jokes because he felt they were both lazy and potentially harmful toward trans people. To quote him directly, "You don't want to have a joke be misunderstood, and then someone goes and beats up a trans person." Good point. And so taking all of this and applying it to comedy and the question, why aren't conservatives very funny? Well, if your goal is to say something from any political perspective that is designed solely to anger a group of people, it's often just pretty fucking boring unless you actually create a valid criticism, or at least involve some unbearable puppet. Not today, buddy! This is especially when it comes to political satire, which often works best with a clear observation, and more often the truth comes back to cruelty, to this image that runs in every conservative's head when they say what they tell themselves is a joke. The angry, screaming lib who is just so triggered, and that's what they actually think is funny.
Yeah, because it is pretty funny.
Trying to get everyone to sing these fucking songs. I know all these songs. I was raised on that number out of my head because it was
I don't think that's the right one.
And honestly, the most frustrating part of all of this is the Democrats, the left, lib bones, libonachis, etc.
Maybe this is the one.
I said what I said, and boy, I heard what you said.
There it is.
My God, how could I not?
Dave Chappelle speaks out, and he's not backing down.
What? I just want to hear the Dave Chappelle parts.
I invited to speak to the transgender employees at Netflix, and I refused. That is not true. If they had invited me, I would have accepted it, although I am confused about what we are speaking about.
Since the special's release, there have been protests and Netflix between him and the transgender
Why are they interrupting the actually good content?
community.
It seems like I'm the only one that can't go to the office anymore.
Gotta find the actual one.
Well, there's like so fucking much you could make fun of them for if you actually came at it from a place of nuance or valid criticism. Non-conservative websites do it all the goddamn time. Sites like Reductress, while sometimes taking shots at the right, mainly devoted to jokes about feminists, and they're feminists. The Onion, The Hard Times, Clickhole, these are all sites that parody themselves more than others. Heck, we do it all the time, and in this video you are watching. It's very, very easy. Here's some news. AOC's Met Gala dress was criticized for being performative activism, as opposed to the rest of her time in office staying under the radar and getting a lot of stuff done. But hey, what's important is that it's driving the conversation, because that's definitely why we elect people. Weird how a lot of the most visible progressives in Congress don't actually introduce laws or co-sponsor bills, but sure like to tweet about a bunch of stuff America should be doing. Tweet harder! I don't know, maybe we need a few more Netflix shows about inequality under capitalism that we can all glom onto and make them nearly $1 billion that they can use to not pay their creators and fire trans people. Hold on, I gotta make another tweet about that injustice while simultaneously gushing over the Great British Baking Show. Team Jurgen, am I right? I'm not saying we can't enjoy ourselves, but there's got to be an option between tweeting from your couch and shadow punching a Nazi in downtown Portland. I mean, both are fun, but perhaps if millennials are also concerned about climate change and wealth inequality, we could run for office, or, I don't know, start a YouTube show with mostly white writers complaining about the world, so as to feel like we made a difference. But at least the Zoomers must think it's super cool how we're yelling at their grandparents for dooming them to a barren wasteland that we're not actually trying to do much to fix. Point is that we're not hard to make fun of. The average 30-year-old liberal male has the facial hair of a high-tech Viking and the secret misogyny of a regular Viking. But none of this answers the original question at hand, the reason we're all here. And now I'm going to stop teasing you with all of my moist words and finally answer it, and then talk about it for probably way too long after that. Are you ready? You look ready. I can see you, you know. The real answer is that conservatives actually are funny, just not in this country or during this era. And in fact, you could even argue the answer is simpler, that the unfunny people we've been talking about simply aren't conservatives in the traditional sense, because conservatism in this country has lurched far beyond what other countries would define as right-wing. And now their agenda isn't to sell us on Republican or Christian humor, rather than tirelessly demonize the left in the context of furious culture war.
Tibor, I think conservatives are as big as snowflakes as everybody else, for sure. I mean, I think that liberal is significantly more sensitive about most things. They're more sensitive about more things. But yeah, there are definitely things that conservatives are sensitive about, for sure.
bullshit that was inflamed by Trump's presidency. I don't know if you recall, but there were actually funny conservative comedians as recently as the mid-2000s.
The Blue Collar Comedy Tour, the tour that's been cracking up America, is finally hitting the big screen.
I had the right to remain silent, but I didn't have the ability.
Okay, you're right. Blue Collar Comedy Tour, the movie.
Comedy is subjective, so maybe the Blue Collar Comedy Tour wasn't your cup of diamond-encrusted panda flesh tea or whatever the common folk drink. However, it was wildly successful at the time. It was also not a fluke, in that you can find a bunch of other comedians specifically pushing religious, right-wing values who are, in the technical term of the word, doing actual jokes.
Because I don't care how holy you are. You slam your hand in a car door, something's coming out of your mouth.
Are they jokes I like? Yeah. But again, we're not trying to make a judgment here, but rather identify jokes that are actually written to be a joke, with like a punchline and an observation, coming from a human and baseline compassionate perspective. To put it in terms they might understand, jokes that identify as jokes. There's actually a whole spectrum of types of conservative humor that was very popular or well done. The blue-collar sitcoms like Roseanne and Home Improvement, and even politically charged comedy from the right. Here's a guy named Adam Yenzer doing a jab at Obama's economy.
Like, Obama wants you to think this country is creating jobs, but it's not. This country created one job, which is Uber driver, and then we all signed up for it. So now our entire economy is based on the fact that we take turns giving each other a ride to the airport in exchange for the same $30.
Conservatives were funny and successful during this time, and also in other countries right now, you know, where Trump wasn't their president.
My friend is from another country, and she came in, she was like, can you please explain what everyone is annoyed about with this whole Brexit thing? I said, look, imagine if you and 10 of your friends were in a Burger King, right? And you said, listen, who wants to leave the Burger King? And 6 people were like, we want to leave the Burger King. And then somebody who didn't want to leave the Burger King was like, I'll get us out of here. I'll have a word with the manager. I'll get us a deal. It's like, do we need a deal? Come on, no, you can't leave without a deal. I'll get a deal. You want to leave? Yeah, I'm going to get us a deal, right? So she goes to talk to the manager. She comes back 2 years later. She's been trying to leave. The door says push. She's pulling that thing. I can't get us out. She goes, great news. I've done us a deal to leave. What's the deal? We've got to pay the manager £40 billion. And then we get to leave. Technically, yes. What do you mean, technically? Well, physically, we'll still be in the Burger King. But if anyone asks you, are you in Burger King, you'll be able to tell them, no, we left.
Putting aside your views on Brexit, that is a pro-Brexit comedian making a pro-Brexit joke in a way that is structurally a joke. I can't believe the bar is this low. And for the record, they still have all that cancel culture anti-woke shit going on over there. I'm not trying to make a judgment on this guy or anything like that, but rather point out that this self-proclaimed right-wing comic still does jokes that conservatives would never do today in America.
In order to love your country, you have to know what's wrong with it. Did you know, historical fact view, the British have been to war with 75% of the countries in the world? Right. This is why no one likes us, man. We're trying to complete the set, right? We had a fight with Argentina over who owns the Falkland Islands. They are based right on the coast of Argentina. Who do you think might be right? Go on. I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, Alistair, careful, you don't understand the political situation that surrounds us. Well, I don't. Here's what I do understand. Imagine a group of people from Kenya came over here and said, listen, I think we own the Isle of Wight.
He's not the only one. Here's another right-wing British comic making a joke about the low minimum wage in his country.
I parked my car at a parking meter in Soho, and the parking meter charged me £6 an hour to park my car. It was actually more than the minimum wage. There were kids working in McDonald's, could look through a window and see a parking meter earning more than they were.
Again, I don't know much about these guys. Maybe they're real monsters, or maybe they're great, but these simply aren't the type of conservative jokes we get over here. But we don't have to talk about Britland or Engelberg or whatever they call it, but monarchium. I don't know. After all, this is about American conservatism, which sure seems to have veered steadily way more into the right after Trump. And I know it seems like a cop-out to put it all on that ghastly Wang, but just hear me out. You can see this simply by comparing mid-2000s American conservative comedy to comedy today.
All right, so the rest of the video I pretty much agree with. Like, that's all good. But yeah, those first 2 points, like, he doesn't, a few problems there. The few problems are the ones I talked about. He doesn't legitimately understand that using gender to be synonymous with sex is a completely legitimate use of language. That's a totally fine thing. And that cancel culture and being an SJW and calling people's workplace to try and get them fired is a real thing. So acknowledging those 2 points are probably the 2 main points I disagree with most to the video. I only watched like part of it before starting this. But yeah, the rest is pretty good. Definitely those conservative comedians are funny, but they should also make jokes against liberalism, not just against conservatism. All right, that's it for today. I'm going to go hang out, listen to Discord stuff probably for a while. If you guys want to join me, join the Discord, link in the bottom right. And I will